Okay, well, I'll get started with the introduction. There might be still be some people popping in. But hi, everyone. I am Sharia Ali. I am the SLP Practice Advisor at AXLPA, and I'll be moderating today. I want to welcome you to this workshop entitled It's Not Just Translation, Intercultural Practice for SLPs Working with Children and Families from Multilingual Backgrounds. It's presented by Lucero Vargas Almeida and Dr. Andrew McLeod. So this workshop will introduce us to intercultural practice and how it can inform and support clinical work with children and families from multilingual and multicultural backgrounds. You're probably here because you know from experience that caseloads in Alberta represent a very diverse set of clients, and so intercultural practice is an invaluable tool to put in our clinician toolboxes. We're especially lucky to have two presenters with extensive experience and expertise on the topic with us today. Lucero is a bilingual SLP herself with diverse experience with Spanish-speaking clients and with multicultural and multilingual children and families. She frequently presents on multilingualism and intercultural practice and has developed several programs and resources to support families and teachers. Andrea began her career in Quebec and has been a professor at the University of Alberta since 2019. She grew up bilingual as well. Through her research, teaching, and clinical work, she has built extensive experience working with multilingual children and their families. So we are very, very grateful to have Lucero and Andrea with us to present today, and I want to thank them in advance on behalf of AXLPA for this learning opportunity. Before I pass things over to them, just some quick housekeeping notes. First, you'll notice that your camera and mic are off, and they're going to stay off for the duration of the presentation. But you can use a chat function to communicate with presenters and other attendees and to ask questions during the question period at the end. I'm going to ask that you save your questions until the end so they don't get lost in the chat. And so I'm going to try to share my screen just really quickly because I have, hopefully you're seeing that. If you're having any technical difficulties at any time, our operations coordinator, Mackenzie, can help you troubleshoot. So let them know in the chat, or if the chat isn't available, you can call or email the contacts shown. Mackenzie's also going to put some instructions in the chat on how to turn on live captioning in Teams. And as per usual, this webinar will be recorded and uploaded on the college's YouTube channel, and it'll be available probably in about a week. So with that, I'll stop sharing, and I will pass things over to Andrea and Lucero.
Great, thank you so much for the introduction, and also for inviting us to join you and be able to share some of our learning and our experiences with all of you members of AXLPA. So before we go much further, I'll let Lucero begin to share the screen, but we will first acknowledge that we're both working and living on traditional territories here in Alberta of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, and we express gratitude and respect for the land we use and pledge to end systemic racism, commit to advancing reconciliation and partnering with Indigenous peoples in our work. So before we go too much further, we thought we would share a little bit about how we met. So I first met Lucero in winter of 2020 in person just before the pandemic began. And we quickly discovered through that first meeting, and then more meetings came afterwards, that we shared, we had this shared perspective about the possibilities for our clinical practice, and the importance of really working with multilingual families in our work, and how challenging it could be, but also how rewarding that work was. We're both, as Sharia said, bilingual, and we're both bilingual SLPs, and we have this deep commitment to serving families from our communities, but also families who have that shared experience of speaking a minoritized language. And for us, kind of being able to support language development and thinking about language maintenance is not just a theoretical concept, but is really a core value in both our personal and our professional lives. So we really had these great conversations. We've worked together over the past 2 years, brainstorming on different ways to support families, sharing some challenging situations, but also some kind of really rewarding and positive outcomes while we've all been managing with COVID. And we started to talk about, well, maybe this is, we have learned some things that would be interesting and important to share more broadly with our community. So anything you want to add, Lucero?
Yes, I think um, I, I wanted to share that I came in 1997 to Canada after working as a speech pathologist in Colombia for 12 years. When I came, I think I want to acknowledge actually and give thanks to Michelle Craig. She was the one who gave me the opportunity to start working as a speech pathologist here in Canada. And I felt blessed, and I feel blessed, still blessed to have that opportunity. And Carla, who was my mentor for a few months, and look, now I am here sharing for 25 years the experience. And that's interesting because when I came, I actually participate in a workshop that Carlsbad did in 1997, and it was the position paper of about the multicultural and multilingual context. So for me, it was so exciting. Wow, I am in Canada and now is that huge opportunity to learn about multilingualism and multicultural practice. But the reason I have this turtle there is because that process has been long. So it has been 25 years working in this area, but the process has been slow. It has been rough. It has been ups and downs as a person and as the professional and as in the context for working with the families and using an approach that are more for them. So this is what I want to share, and something that amazed me is that the population, the multilingual families, is growing so much. When I came 25 years, even I I I came with my two older children who were just Spanish speakers. And I remember that one of the teacher suggestion was to stop Spanish to support my children to learn. In that moment, was a big opportunity for me to start to research and to start to work and understand more if it is true, if to stop the language will help more, or if to continue learning the language for those children, it will be better. And now we know that it is truth, is better to uh, to support that. So Andrea, we made those that information about all how many languages we have here now in Edmonton, in Alberta.
I think the screen isn't sharing right now, but if you want to pop it back
Okay.
up, I can show, just a
Okay, let
figure
me
that
try
kind of
again.
illustrates.
Yes, yes, sorry.
No
Thank you.
problem.
So now
There
it's
we
there?
go. Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
Yeah, and we just pulled some figures from here. We have the top 10 non-English home languages that were reported on the most recent census in Alberta. And we can see that not only are there many languages, they're quite different, so different language families, and we definitely see a growth pattern. So kind of thinking through how to provide equitable and I guess equitable and positive experiences for children who are in their families who are multilingual is part of our reality, and it's going to be part of our future as well. So on our next
Yeah.
slide, we want to highlight that much of our work comes really from a monolingual, much of our work as speech language pathologists comes from a monolingual framing. And it's a framing that we see in research that carries over into our training and into our practice. But this can lead to silent discrimination. So when we look at our work through this model, we can start realizing, well, who accesses SLP services? When does this access occur? When are families consulted and included in the process? And how are families supported through the process? One of the strategies to improve access is really thinking about, in the French community, what we call l'offre active, which is the active offer. And really here, rather than putting the offer to provide services or provide support around language translation, cultural brokering, onto making it the clients that they need to make the ask, that really flipping that model and making it the role of the team. So the team should be offering language supports early and often throughout the process. We know that families might refuse as they might feel capable in that language. They may feel like they don't want to impose, or that they don't want to wait any longer. Sometimes having services in one's language might be tied to longer wait lists, for example. Families may feel like they don't need a translator because they know English, but later find that they're struggling to clarify their cultural expectations and their own needs. And some of this is where cultural brokers who can both support the language, but also provide that link to understand the family's culture and dynamics. So help the team understand those, but also help the team figure out how to better adapt services. And we know there's an impact on family. So monolingual services impacts both the client, both the child and their family's language use. And when everything's in English, what we're doing is really emphasizing that this is the important language. And so we're sending a lot of explicit messages, but also implicit messages that may lead families to feel like it's not important or valued to maintain their home language.
And we call silent discrimination because sometimes we are not conscious what we are doing. But in general, when we go to a place and in the school, everything is in English, or all the pictures are not representing everyone, you feel excluded, right? When even the food that you are eating or the food the kids take is it's smelly, and maybe it's not accepted for others, or the way you eat with your hands. Even if you don't say anything, children, especially children, and the families, parents can feel it and can start to think that it is something wrong with them. They cannot do that. It's no. So they start to lose the confidence, and of course it brings many damage, many difficulties in the future for the children and for the family. Is that what we say that we call silent discrimination.
So what we're advocating for, and not just us, but part of a community that's advocating for shifting paradigms. So one of it is linked to the words we use, right? So stepping away or stepping back from using terms like English language learner or limited English proficiency to refer to the person. We can describe a person as a person who is an English language learner, but saying this ELL child really is using that part of their identity as the only way that we're defining that person. The term is also problematic because it centers English and majority culture. It really provides this deficit framing from the outset, as it intentionally overlooks knowledge that the child or the adult or the family can bring to the context. And it also has this effect of homogenizing a heterogeneous population. So by saying English language learner, what we're doing is we're putting everyone that speaks a language other than English in the same box. And we're ignoring a lot of the major differences that may exist within that box. And those differences might be cultural, they might be linked to immigration paths, so which may and reflect different family experiences, time in Canada. So there's a lot of differences within our communities, and by grouping them together in this way, we're kind of explicitly ignoring them. So what we're suggesting moving towards is something where we're talking more about bilingual and multilingual children and their families. And part of this is that when we think about linguistic diversity, of color, you're more likely also to speak another language at home. Our Indigenous communities have experienced oppression and cultural, really the work towards cultural death by extinguishing their home languages. And so really thinking about linguistic diversity as part of this diversity that's around us, and that it's part of a person's identity that includes many other aspects. And also seeing bilingualism as a strength, so having those social and cultural advantages, educational advantages, and professional advantages. And this is where our work has led to, has been informed by a community cultural wealth model. And this model, I'll get you to go to the next slide. Yeah, this model is also used, or is used by the multicultural health brokers here in Edmonton. And the strength of this model, which was proposed by Yoso in 2005, is really that it emerged, first of all, as a response to a deficit framing or deficit model of marginalized children. And what's great about it is it focuses on the abilities and resources of children and their families. And this Yoso talks about these different capitals, or these different wealth that families have. It includes linguistic wealth, so knowing your home language, a familial wealth, which is really about that home culture and that support that your family can provide. Aspirational and resistance wealths, those reflect being able to dream about the future, even when the current reality has many challenges, and also the resistance side of being able to have a counter narrative to negative or racist stereotypes that exist in our communities. Navigational wealth really speaks to being able to find one's way through the system, and that may come from using community resources, but also broader resources that are in the community. And for example, some of our families are quite strong at navigating their way through the healthcare system to provide support for their families, and others find it really overwhelming and really struggle with that navigation. And then social wealth is really that presence of a broader community that's there to support you and kind of uplift you, and finding that as part of those strengths. And in our experiences, what we found is the linguistic capital, although it's not always essential to these other parts of those types of wealth, it really can enhance and support these other capitals. So providing that, having that strong or that home language that brings people together really can support these other areas as well. So this is where we're going to start talking about this intercultural practice together. So this is a quote from Dura, who spoke about, "It's not enough to favor inclusion if one does not believe in the knowledge-making abilities of participants or does not practice culturally relevant knowledge-making processes or methodologies." So Dura works more in a research area, but what I loved about this quote was really thinking about when we think about inclusion, what that means is also including other people's values, other people's, the way people see about how they build that knowledge, how they build that, their knowledge and their expertise, and including that in our work. So intercultural practice provides a framework for clinicians that doesn't only acknowledge, but also strives to understand different ways of knowing, living, and doing, and in turn finds a way to connect that with others in their practice. So intercultural practice is a form of cultural humility. And what we're going to do today is really invite you along this path with us, and acknowledging that we're all at different stages in our work and our experiences, and really trying to think creatively about how we can make changes, and those changes may look different, for each one of us, but really trying to kind of open this door and think collectively about how we can move forward.
And like I said at the beginning, the process has been long. So I really acknowledge that now we have that awareness that we see that everyone is talking, yes, is discrimination, is we don't have equal, the families who have different backgrounds don't have equal access to services. We acknowledge that. We know that's something we need to do, but we don't know maybe how. And that's the reason we are here today. Let's go to work together. Let's go to see how can we help those families who are underserved to support them. And because something that I feel that sometimes, and I have been here, sadly, I have that experience in a workplace where I assessed almost 60 Spanish children to get services. And then the supervisor asked me, and what is for us? So I don't make any comment. I just ask you. I at this point, I still don't understand that comment or that question. I don't understand, because we are here in Canada. We are from different backgrounds, right? And all we are Canadian. I am Canadian. So it's not a privilege. It's something that we need to do, and it's ethical as a speech pathologist to work for those, to be the voice of those families. So I invite, and we are inviting today to accept that we make mistakes, that maybe we don't know exactly how to do it, but we are able to work together and do something better.
So on the next slide, I wanted to talk a little bit about this part of our title where we say it's not just translation. And what we're not saying that translation is not important. So translation is an important part of our tool belt for being able to share information and communicate with families who are multilingual. And I wanted to share this really great, for example, infographic that's provided by an Ontario organization about their infant hearing program. So Lucero, if you click, I think we'll see something. Which bubble will appear? Will anything appear? There we go. So they've actually translated their program in a number of different languages. So that's a really great start to be able to make the information accessible, but it's not enough. It is just a first step. So if we click again, we see that this document has different pieces of information, but a family might experience literacy in the language that's different. So they may have different language abilities. They might understand the language, but not always be able to read it fluently, or be able to read it, but maybe not the technical terms. And if we look at some of the information, so I'll get you to click again, Sarah. They may have different terms for hearing loss, or different understanding of what having hearing loss or being deaf, how that's understood and valued in the culture may be different than how it's understood and valued in the majority Canadian culture. Next click. They may not know whether the services are free. They may wonder if it's accessible, if they're a refugee or an asylum seeker or a non-permanent resident, and may hesitate to ask those questions because they might fear being prosecuted, because some of people have experienced that in their home country. And so raising questions about one's citizenship may lead to further questioning. If we can click again. Other questions that may arise is there's information about how children develop languages, but this may not actually reflect the family's understanding of how language learning occurs and who's involved in supporting that. And I think my last example is about services are available, and they talk about program professionals. Maybe people don't know who that might be. And there might be a worry that, well, maybe the child needs to move away from home to receive support, as was the case, even in Canada 30 or 40 years ago, and is the case in a number of different countries. So again, translation is a first step, but there's this additional steps that need to be done. And this is part of that intercultural practice where we're opening up and trying to understand more how we can help families along this process. So when we think about these steps, we'll be talking about assessing our own values and beliefs, being open to learning from other cultures, seeing ourselves as an ally for the child and the family, having a deep knowledge of the client's context, accepting other ways to obtain results, negotiating practices, and supporting the client's values. And all of this takes time and needs to be done there needs to be the building of trust throughout this process. So it's a significant undertaking, but a really important and valuable undertaking. And what we're going to do to kind of step through this process is introduce a case study to guide our reflections. So we're going to be using this to guide and ground our concepts, and it's going to be an unfolding case study. So what we're going to do is provide a little bit of information at first, ask you some reflections, and hopefully you'll be comfortable enough to share a question or a comment in the chat throughout this process. And then we'll provide a little bit more information and we'll move ahead on the next step. So we're hoping this is interactive, but we understand that the online context makes it a little bit challenging as well, but we're going to give it a go.
So we have many cases, and the truth, it was really hard to decide which case could be the best scenario for today. So we are going to work in one, and if we have time, we have prepared another two cases, but 1 hour is too short really to talk about this. So what we want today to do is that when we tell the story, you can please think about what we can learn from that story, what can be done differently, what could be the first step to go from the awareness to the practice. Now that we know that we have to do something, what else can we do? So let's go to brainstorm together and bring this into practice. So the case A is a girl, older girl who has cerebral palsy and has been attending junior high, but has been refusing to go to school.
So as one of the first steps in this process is thinking about, well, what are my beliefs and my values? So considering our own intersectional identity and really thinking that through. And it's just a really great part of our practice around cultural humility. So this step, which can do kind of on our own, some reflection, we can discuss with others, but thinking about what our experiences, our values, our beliefs, and what they are, and what do we bring into the space, into our clinical or professional space with us. Which of these are visible? So sometimes some of our values are visible, some are less so. And how does this influence our work? Which of our values align with the institutional and professional frameworks that we work in, and which do we need to adapt? Like, where have you felt that friction in the past, and maybe thinking about how to adapt? So if we brought this to the case A, thinking about our beliefs and our values. Maybe you have some reflections about what beliefs and values you have, just to that brief introduction to the case. So this is a moment if
So if
anybody...
somebody has an idea and want to tell us what are the, when you hear that case, a girl who doesn't go to school and is a teenager, what do you think about the family, about the case? What could be your first thought about this? I maybe many of you could think that is the family responsibility, right? It's the parents who has to take the girl to the school. Nothing to do with the school, because it's the girl is 14 years and the parents need to take it. So the school and everyone is expecting that this girl goes to school because is still young and she cannot be at home.
And you may have, through our professional work, your beliefs, have expectations about schooling for children with special needs, and see that high school is still highly relevant and well adapted to kids in with special needs like cerebral palsy. You may feel like you can trust the authorities. Turning to the school for advice might be some strategies that some of us may use. And if we wanted more support as a parent, like who would we turn to, or who might you turn to? I personally might turn to the teacher. I might turn to some parents in my community for more insight. But all of those really frame kind of the beliefs that we're bringing to the table. And that they might not be shared, right? Like this is the way I would think through this problem, but that might not be the way the family has thought through or has experienced this problem. And this is where that next step is so important, which is, there we go, no problem. So this is some ideas we had around this case. And if we go to the next slide, our next step is, so taking a moment when we read a case and thinking about our own experiences, and then looking to learn from other cultures. So learning from the family. So taking time to do that, learning about immigration paths to Canada, for example, and what do they mean? Being present in the community and observing, asking questions to community leaders, and really doing that from a position of curiosity and genuine interest, and doing it in a polite and respectful way as well. So can I ask you more about, or I seem to have seen this, could you tell me more about that? And continued learning and exploration. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So when we did those questions, when we start to research and observe and to the parents, and because this is a real case, right? This is not something that we are making up. It's something that happens. So we figure out that this family comes from Syria, that the families don't have literacy still. They never went to a school. They are farmers. They use even to sleep together, whole family, grandma, and in the front of the house because it was too hot. So and even the children, the 14-year-old girl that only has been 4 years here, didn't go to school because she had the neurodevelopmental difference, right? So back home, she didn't have an opportunity to go to school. So knowing that they never have that concept of a school, how can we understand why the family is not so worried like the school is to send the girl to the school? And what can we do to support the family to understand the potential and the needs of the girl.
This can be where our work also comes into that next step, is working as an ally. So in developing that understanding of the family and the family's context, this isn't something that you learn about all these details in a quick 5-minute conversation over the phone, but it's something that can emerge through several conversations. And sometimes you learn more as you gradually interact with the family. So it's kind of taking that time to build that connection and for them to feel like they can trust you. And that's when we can become this ally, and we'll go to the next slide, an ally for the child and their family. I'll let you click ahead. Yeah, so thinking about ourselves and trying to advocate for them. So developing that deep appreciation for the strengths and the perspectives that the family bring. So Lucero was saying that, well, the family didn't have access or to formal schooling, and that was in part the qualities of being a part of a very rural community, but also the war in Syria that disrupted formal schooling for many families for basically there's a generation that's growing up with little access to formal schooling. And but they value their family, they value learning, and but how that's coming or putting itself into how that's occurring in our context is different. So helping to bring forward that strength. And we can also do this work of allyship by supporting the family's values, and then also helping them negotiate the values of the Canadian education and healthcare system, and trying to bring those two closer together.
So something that when we start to ask questions and to understand why the girl is not going to a school, and to work with the family closer, we realize that there are 5 members. That is another girl who has difficulties as well, who has a profound hearing loss, and who has significant educational implications. The family didn't know that the girl was deaf until she came to Canada, because in the place where the older girl has the cerebral palsy, has the limitation with the physical difficulties, but with the language difficulties as well. So when the second girl born and has difficulties with the language, they thought that it was something similar, not that one was with cerebral palsy and the another one was deaf. And because the girl respond there quite well to the rest of the activities, they didn't think that it was what was the reason. They didn't know why it was happening.
So again, instead of thinking, well, this is maybe a case of neglect or parents that don't interact with their child, thinking more broadly about that context that the family has come from, and transmitting that to our team members so that we can build together this better understanding. And like we said, it takes time to build the trust. Being able to learn about the strengths and perspectives that the family bring, and support the family's values and help them with that next step. And then we really, as SLPs, also have that responsibility to help other professionals know more about the family. So we have this kind of role, and also I think, we think responsibility that we have to be able to support them.
And thank you, Andrea, for is one important point here, that is trust. if we realize that the majority of those families come from really challenging spaces, where they don't trust anybody, they don't trust government, they don't trust even sometimes the neighbors, right? Because something could happen. They have that background experience that don't allow here to trust us in general. So the first thing for us, in order to really support those families, is to build that trust, to hear them, to know how they are feeling, what is the actual context. So it's not only the pre-immigration information that is important, it's also what is happening now. Because the family context of today, even if they are Syrian, they are Spanish, they are Colombian, it's not the same Colombians that back home, right? We have, because we have to live so many, maybe we are better human beings, and we have been learning more things from here, but at the same time we keep roots from our back home that make us different. Like sometimes we say, when we go back, we say we are not from here, no, we are not from there, right? But it happens with our families. So, and our families, because they are in the context, we in the outside see, oh, they are Syrians, and we want to thinking that all of them work in the same way, or they are thinking in the same way, or their dynamics would be totally different, right? And so that's the reason that the first step, build the trust in order to know the context and to understand the background information.
Great. And this is that piece this slide really just summarizes what Lucero so clearly said, that deep knowledge of the context that comes with time. The need for us in our role is trying to create that openness for families to feel comfortable sharing information. And, Lucero and I both talked about, we don't feel like we're naturally good at drawing people out and have this sense of, there's some people, I know a few people and I'm like, they're just so good at talking and but it's something I've been working on, figuring out how to do that better, how to be more comfortable, how to be, anyways, my own ideas of what's private and personal, and respecting boundaries, and thinking about all these questions for myself. And I find things like asking open questions rather than questions that may be loaded with value judgments, and really thinking about, where is this question coming from? So sometimes we have these like questionnaires that are pretty standard, and yet when we look at them, we start realizing, there's a lot of loaded questions, there's a lot of value judgment in these, and is there another way to get this information? And I like questions like, tell me about your day, because you really get a sense of, well, what's a day for this family? And exploring things like, that sounds difficult, what do you do next? To think about, well, how do we problem solve together? Reflecting on what people have said. I hear that you do this. That's a really important strategy. So again, bringing back that emphasis on their strengths and exploring, well, have you tried this, right? So we are all looking for new, often looking for new tools to be able to do things differently, but acknowledging that there's also some really good habits that are there. And being a keen observer are some elements there. So if we come back to our case, do you want to add to it here? I think we've talked, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Next one.
Sure. So we have both a case of a family that doesn't necessarily trust the authorities, and there's really this mismatch between the school and the parent's sense of who's responsible for attending school, and difficulty finding supports. And then there's this added complexity within the family of another daughter who has significant communication challenges as well. And do you want to speak to her a little bit?
Yes. So in that case, this girl was, as soon the system is so effective here, right? They came, they arrived, they went to to get assessment. They realize that this girl is deaf. They even assess for a cochlear implant. But then, because they just came, and imagine this family, now that we know this information, can you imagine a farmer family, really a farmer family, whole family, even the girls were farming. So come here, go to a office space and a good technology, but even a simple toy like a potato head, it could be scary for them. I know families, for example, that African families, for example, never play with farm animals. So for a child to have in your hands a farm animal is quite, could be bring curiosity, but at the same time could be bring anxiety, right? Right? Because they don't know what to do with that. And if that girl was assessed in that situation, chances are that the results are not accurate, and they were not. She was she was not accepted for cochlear implant because of that. Now that we are working, and I imagine here is a really good helper, Sarah, who is a speech pathologist and speak Arabic. She has been working with me in this case, and we know this girl has potential, has skills in Arabic, has a skill in English. She doesn't talk at school because she's a smart girl, right? She didn't talk in the office place with the audiologists or with the speech pathologist because she was not confident and she was not going to try, but she really wants to do it. And today, I know it's a short time. I would like to say many more things, but please, what happened with, this is just one case. And believe me, I have like hundreds of cases, sad cases. This case is that, but the majority of cases are with child services. When we don't work with those families, families finish. But if we were not here, this family it will be reported for neglect. It will be saying the aggression of the older girl has been growing. It was growing so much that even she was aggressive in at the hospital with the doctors or nurses or physiotherapists. So the things aggravate, and it's going to affect us as a community, as a society. So we have a huge responsibility to support those children and those families. And we cannot avoid more. We cannot be like the turtle in a really slow. I think we need to change that and to be, I don't know what could represent us, but to be together and work together.
Excellent. Some of this process of working together is thinking about and accepting that there's other ways to obtain results, and there's different other ways. So we've listed a few here, but one of the key parts that we've been thinking about, and I'll talk quickly through this slide and maybe the next few, Lucero, so we can spend a bit of time on your model at the end. But that we need to empower parents to engage in the intervention by working with them directly. So sometimes there's this challenge of having this linguistic barrier means that we may be going through other folks to be able to bring them along, but that can create this sense of distance and this sense of well, this is not a message that I really need to pay attention to. So by working with families directly, using their language and finding strategies that are relevant to them, not only engages them in the work and in the support of their children, but also empowers them in that process. And that's such an important part of this intercultural practice. If we skip ahead to negotiating practices, I think we've come a long way since 1997, and 1997 was a long way from 1977, right? So acknowledging multilingualism and multiculturalism is something that we do quite a bit, but it's not enough. We need to be adapting and using culturally and linguistically, adapting culturally and linguistically to our families. That's part of our job. It's not them that need to adapt to us. If we're really going to be client and family centered, we need to be doing some of this really important and heavy lifting.
And remember, it's not only, for example, I know that we celebrate Chinese Year, Light of Celebration, Cinco de Mayo, but it's not that, right? Intercultural practice is more than that. It's more than to have sharing food, to make a potluck, or to have a party. We really need to make something different, and it's time to do it. And it's time to do together and to collaborate and to be strong. It's not an easy path, but we have to learn from the past. We have to learn from all these mistakes that we are making, because actually our children, right, who are there, our families who are there. So we really need to support each other, learn each other, and keep building. So we have two ways, two paths, or to keep doing this that we are doing and ignore it and avoid it. But many families are going to keep growing with high needs. And or to really use different ways. And because of all these years of experience here, brought me an idea of really building from the roots, right? I always compare that culture and language are the roots of the plants. If you cut those roots, you cannot grow a tree, right? So you really need to have that child in the center. Remember the family, the social diversity, the school and community settings, the cultural and linguistic background, to collaborate with all of them. You cannot work a lot alone. We have to really go from our speech services as a communication with the holistic approach with those families. And then really build. I know with the majority of us, we work with passion, we love our job, but we have to really collaborate and learn together. And I want to share, of course, this is a growing, right? I haven't, but I have to share, it's not only challenge. I have many challenge and many difficulties, but it's the beauty of working with families. I will share last week. It has a really challenged family who has four kids in the spectrum, and three of the kids are with child services, thinking that they need to take to foster homes. So they called me to say, we are going to give you 6 more months to help the family to learn and manage behavior. So we did the miracle. I shared with with Andrea last week. I got the miracle. I was calling that the system is giving me, oh my goodness, but we did the miracle. See the family together, see mom smiling. Remember, we have to empower mothers. Mothers in immigrants, I know everyone, but sometimes we forget, and we give them, because of the language barrier, we give the information to a sibling, we give the information to the husband, and the husband don't share, or we even use the aide or the assistant to give, we give the support, and then we say, but mom is not practicing, mom is not doing anything, mom is just cooking, and we have been 5 years working. She must know, or she must have cognitive delays because she is not learning, or she doesn't want. So no, I will say that if we really spend the time with the families, everyone can learn, everyone can have the potential. So let's go to try and enjoy that. I really enjoy this job. It's beautiful, it's challenging, but the reward then is great. And I have this picture of the Amazons because what I want to say is the nature teach us, right? In Amazons, there are trees, there are butterflies, there are snakes, there are flowers, there are all kind live together, and they can live together. They are so different, but they can be together and build together. So why we don't build together a beautiful path for us, but for them too?
So I think that wraps us up. Thank you so much for that that ending, Lucero. We have a bit of time for questions, and of course, if there's questions in the chat we don't get to, we'd be happy to send a written response or share a written response.
I'm seeing one question in the chat saying, will you share examples of value-loaded questions? So people may ask questions trying to be respectful, but others may perceive the question as too personal or not understand why they're being asked the question.
It can be simple questions like asking you, so if we're interested in feeding, it can be questions about like, you know, how does your child feed themselves? Or when did your child begin using a spoon, for example, to feed themselves? And for us, well, I would say not for us. I would say as a white Canadian from an Anglo-Saxon background, that happens pretty young, and there's no value linked to being able for a child to use a spoon. It's like, I'm glad that they're able to do it. And in talking with some different communities, some communities really see that a mother being able to feed their own child is a sign of love and a sign of caring. And so there's not an expectation that the child will use a spoon to feed themselves. There's also communities that don't eat with utensils. They'll eat with, with bread as adults. So it seems like a neutral question, and yet there's different messages we're sending in that. And sometimes it's done so quickly that a family might be like, well, why are we asking, or why is it that important? And what does that mean in the bigger scheme of things? So that's like maybe a simple example, but an example that seems simple, but yet has all these layers of complexity.
There's just another question. Do you have any recommendations for any multilingual SLP interest groups or professional development resources?
That's a really good
something that would,
yeah.
Go
ahead, Lucero.
question. Yeah, and there are not too many, right? And again, if we go back to what Andrea said, the way that we start to know is to meet, and Andrea came to us, to the brokers, to know and to help us. But we start to build those resources because there are not many resources, right? So in pandemic, for example, we build that support with the students, of have different materials for the families, different ideas with no toys and with minimal resources, right? So I think we have to create. It's not something that is there, right? we have to create. There are some, of course, but no, like, we have to build it. They are no easy to access those.
And there's resources like Americans that have developed some really strong resources, but they're often quite US focused and don't really take into account, I think, the Canadian context, which is quite different for all kinds of reasons. And so I'll take that question and brainstorm a little bit, and I could share with Sharia what we can pull together.
That would be great. So I'm just looking at the time, and we're right at 1 o'clock. And I know people probably attended in their lunchtime meetings, but thank you so much. That was so impactful and powerful, and I need to go and sit away and reflect on it on my own as well. So thank you so much, and thanks to everyone for attending. And I think we're going to follow up with a survey and also those resources that Andrea has offered. So thank you so much, everyone.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Bye.